Hi, Jen.
Hi, Monet.
We are so excited to finally be doing this. It took us 6 months. We came up
Long
with this
time.
idea in the fall, I think, of 2023, and we sat on it. We got really excited. We ordered mics. We had to return a mic because it was broken. We had a crazy winter and we're finally here. And we are so excited to be recording our very first podcast.
I'm super pumped to be doing this.
We are glad you're here and we are going to dive in. Hi, it's Monet and Jen, and we are the co founders of Birth Becomes You. We are birth photographers and doulas with over 10 years of experience. We've attended over 1,000 births collectively. We started Birth Becomes You to create a safe space for new and experienced birth photographers to share and grow. We aim to equip and empower birth workers to feel confident in the birth space and take beautiful, world changing images. We believe in a world where birth is visible, where shame is absent, where fear is translated to power, and where each individual's experience is honored as valid and valued. We are so glad you're here, and we can't wait to learn and connect with you. So, today we wanted to share with you just how Birth Becomes You got its start. It's been 10 years now, which feels crazy to me since we started Birth Becomes You. And over the last decade, we have met so many incredible birth photographers and birth workers and built a really beautiful community that continues to blow us away with not only the work that you share, but your compassion and your heart and just the presence you have in your local birth community and the world. So we're going to go all the way back to, I guess we met, was it 2014, Jen?
2014 is when we met. Yep.
Yeah. So Jen and I were both in Colorado. I was in Colorado Springs and Jen was in Denver. And we were both baby birth photographers. I think Jen, you got started a little bit before me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My
And
first birth was in 2013. Yeah.
yep. And then I came on the scene a little bit after that. I think I started actually around 2014.
hmm
And Jen and I became friends because at that time, Facebook was definitely a place and a thing where people went. And we must have met each other in one of the Facebook birth groups.
Yep.
We were both fairly new, as I mentioned. And so there was something really lovely about having another photographer that you could talk with. We weren't super intimidated by each other. At the time, there was kind of an established crew in the Denver area, and we were definitely not part
Not.
of the established crew. And so
No.
Jen and I bonded almost immediately.
hmm
And we were each other's competition, but I think because of when we started and just our desire for community and connection, we never really viewed each other as competition. I think almost from the beginning, we were like, how can we work together to make both of our businesses better and to also make the birth community better?
Yeah. I mean, the birth community needed visibility at that time too. And I think that's really what motivated me. I was doing some weddings and other types of photography. And at that time, way back when, um, submitting to blogs were in, and you would submit, these beautiful wedding pictures to a blog, and then the blog would publish it. And so I tried to do that with some birth stories, and nobody published any birth stories. And so for me, I just felt like there needed to be a place for birth photographers to be able to share their work and get their name out there in the world, and just like so that people could see birth. And that was my really big motivation. And when I told Monet about that and we kind of talked about it, she was like, yeah, we need to do that. Let's do it. And so I loved her drive because I kind of have that same drive, and that was really like amazing for us to be able to like come up with this idea and make it happen together. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. And we definitely, I think the funny thing or the thing about Jen and I is that, we got this idea of like, we want to find a way and a place to, one, share beautiful birth images, and two, kind of create a community of learning. But we were still really young birth photographers. We were not super experienced. And so we actually got a little bit or maybe a lot of flack from the more established birth pros because they were like, gosh, these girls, these women are brand new. Like, what are they doing? But at the same time, we really felt like there was such a need for more visibility. Like Jen said, it was during the time when like wedding pros or even like newborn photographers would share images and they would get tons of views, tons of blog posts. And birth at that point, I mean, it was pre all the changes within Facebook and Instagram. And so, if you're sharing a birth image with any kind of nudity, you're getting, immediately the content is taken down, immediately your account is taken away and banned. And so we were like, gosh, like we know that we're new at this, but we also feel like this needs to be done. And we both just have a little bit of, we have a lot of ambition. And I think we have a little bit of bravado, and just we're like, we're just going to do this. Even if we're maybe not the most at this time qualified folks to do this, someone needs to take action. And so that's what we started to do way back in 2014. And around that time as well, Jen and I, we were refining our craft. We were learning about birth photography ourselves, right? At that time, there was no manual, there was no guide, there was no course that you could take to learn how to do birth photography. Everything was really, you could learn from a really established wedding pro, or you could learn from a really established newborn or lifestyle photographer and try to apply that to the birth space. But there wasn't really many people or any people that were teaching specifically how to photograph births. And so Jen and I would go to births as these brand new baby birth photographers, and we were really like learning in the birth space. And I would go to a birth and be like, oh my goodness, I encountered this situation. We were in this really dark, small basement room, and I could not figure out how to capture birth. And so Jen and I would process that together and troubleshoot and figure out how the heck to do this incredibly difficult but incredibly amazing job. And so we were like, okay, we're learning, we're piecing this all together, we're figuring things out, and our photography was improving. But we were like, God, like there really needs to be a way and a place and a space to share this content and this information with newer birth photographers. Because while it was doable and we did it, it was really stressful and hard to have to learn how to do this job in somebody else's birth space. And we didn't, it's like if we were gleaning all of this kind of insider information, why not create an easy way to share that with new birth professionals so they didn't have to kind of make the mistakes that we made? Jen and I both talk about we wish we could go back in time because there's so many beautiful births we attended, like the first year or two where we were photographing births where we just didn't really know what we were doing. And
Right.
we missed some incredible moments and shots. I mean, of course, our birth families are so happy, and I'm so happy that we were there, but we were really, really new. And so we wanted to eliminate that really, really steep learning curve for newer birth photographers. So around that time, we also created the Birth Photography Toolkit, which was our first, I guess, product or educational offering that we presented to the community. And we were so thrilled because we had hundreds of people download it and purchase it. And we almost immediately, within probably like an 18-month period, saw birth photography go from like a lot of like black and white, really grainy, poorly exposed images to vibrant colors, a lot more cool crowning images. Like it was like this explosion within the birth photography world. And of course, there were so many factors, and we were not, the only cause of this. But I do think that there was something about the beginning of Birth Becomes You, the space where photographers could get together, chat, share, learn, the toolkit, all of that came together at the right time. And it kind of led to this renaissance in birth photography that was really, really cool to witness and be a small part of.
Yeah. One other thing that we really wanted to make sure to include in the toolkit and in the birth space is we wanted people to step into the space knowing how to act around birth, because you're stepping into a hospital. You're not, in somebody's wedding or in somebody's living room taking photos. You're actually, a lot of the time in the hospital, or, somebody's home or a birth center or whatever. And we just wanted people to be able to know how to act and take photos in that space without doing anything that was going to damage anybody else in that birth space and their ability to take photos as well. I mean, that was a big piece of this. We wanted people to be able to do it and do it well and do it in a way that was comfortable for every birth worker in that space.
Absolutely. I think that, before Birth Becomes You, when we were starting out, the general consensus was, if you're a birth photographer, you need to be a fly on the wall. You need to come in and document, but you're not really part of the birth team. You're there to document the experience. And while I understand and I respect that viewpoint, I think Jen and I were like,
No.
this is not for us. And we really
Right.
believe that one, like we want to be part of the birth team. We're not just there to be a fly on the wall. We're there to document, but we want to have a relationship with our clients. We want to have a relationship with the providers that we're working with. We want them to recognize us and know us. And then we want to take those images and share them in a way that makes change. I think that was another big thing that drove the beginning of
Mhm.
Birth Becomes You, was that this was not just about delivering a gallery of 100 black and white photos to a family. This is about taking images that could be shared with the purpose of changing birth culture, both locally, nationally, and around the world. That's always been really important to us. And I think it's, in my mind, one of the most important things that I do as a birth photographer. Yes, of course, these are amazing and precious images to these families, but I want the time that I spend in the birth space and the images that I create to make lasting change for families that may not be able to hire a birth photographer, that may not have access to all the resources that I have access to or that other folks have access to. So this is about lasting change. And so I think hand in hand, we started to kind of build up this sense of advocacy, and our Facebook and our Instagram following started to grow because we were sharing these really dynamic, powerful images. And we weren't afraid to talk about things that I think in the past, birth photographers kind of shied away from. There was a lot of like, we shouldn't have an opinion about this because we're just birth photographers. And we came in and said, no, actually, we do have an opinion about this. And our opinion is valid. And it's based on witnessing and sitting with people's real lived birth stories and experiences. So all of this was kind of brewing. I'm making sourdough bread right now. And so I'm like constantly like taking care of my starter, and like things are like fermenting and growing. So if I use a lot of that language today, it's because I'm fully in sourdough bread mode. But anyway, I just felt like things started to grow and bubble up in the early 2000, mid 2015, 2016 is when things were really starting to pick up. And we created these beautiful birth montage videos where we compiled clips of birth from photographers all over the country and the world. And we put them together and they went just crazy viral. It was the time in the algorithm where that kind of content was really popular. And so we would create these birth videos, and it was so cool because it took all of these disparate stories and weaved them together in a way that showed the world that, like, yes, we all birth so differently, but deep down at the core, there's so much similarity here. It was just incredibly powerful to witness and to create. And those videos went crazy viral and really
It was
helped
crazy. It was
catapult, I
wild.
think, yeah, birth imagery to, the forefront of everyone's feed. It was no longer like this kind of obscure thing that you had to search really hard for. It was like, oh, like my great aunt in St. Louis is like sharing my birth video. People that you wouldn't necessarily think would be super invested in birth culture were really moved by what they were seeing. And we started to see this ripple effect where birth photography started to go more mainstream, which was a really cool thing to witness.
And I think a lot of that had to do with like how birth ties us all together, right? I mean, we're all born, many of us give birth or we witness our partner giving birth. And so it was like all of these stories that people really hadn't seen, like just like Monet said, in the forefront of the media. My grandmother was able to like see birth photos for the first time. And, she was put in twilight sleep and never saw or felt or even heard her five children cry for the first day of their lives. And so, I mean, I just remember her being so moved in her 90s by this. So I knew that we had something really special when every generation was just in awe of seeing these photos.
Absolutely. So, I think that kind of sets the foundation for who or what Birth Becomes You is. We're a group of passionate birth workers who are committed to positive change within the birth world. We're also committed to visibility. We want birth to be visible. We think that there is so much power in being able to see not only your own birth, but other people give birth as well. I think of, Floor from Badass Mother Birther and what she has done. And it's in a similar vein, right? There's so much power in being able to see real lived experiences of the birth process. So that has always been huge for us. But the other thing that I think we can't not talk about is the community, the Birth Becomes You community, and the birth photographers and the birth workers that we've gotten to know over the last 10 years. I know I speak for many of us when I say that Birth Becomes You community has given space for so many beautiful, deep, lifelong friendships to form. And when I think about Birth Becomes You and our legacy, I do think that that's going to rise to the top. All of the connections that have been made over the years, all of the support that has been given. I was talking to my husband this morning and I was like, it's just this job that we do is so weird and unique and unusual. And I don't know if I could continue to do it if I didn't have the ability to connect with other people that understood what I was going through. Jen and I still, every week, we are talking on the phone about, okay, this person is in labor and when should I go and what do you think? And what that connection and that ability to bounce things off somebody else who really understands it is absolutely invaluable. And so we have loved being able to foster that community within our Facebook group. And then, of course, it's like that's just where it starts. And then these little friendships build. And, I know that there are people talking to each other in the middle of the night when they're at a birth with their best bud from Birth Becomes You because they form that connection. And so that's a really, really important part of who we are and what we do is the friendship and the camaraderie that comes from being with people that understand what you're living day in and day out. Being on call is so hard. Unlike a lot of birth workers, most of us are on call 24/7. We don't have shift work. And so it's a really demanding lifestyle and it's important to be with people that get it.
Yeah, it really is. And it's demanding for your families as well. And so, like Monet said, it's really nice to just have that community of support day in and day
Yes.
out or at night as well.
Yes, yes, often at night, often in the middle of the
Mostly at
night.
night. Yeah.
Right, right.
I'm on a string of night births, so we're at night over here.
Yeah. And then a few years in, of course, we had the birth photography toolkit, we had contracts, we had presets, we had a lot of resources for birth photographers, but we felt like there was really, again, so much knowledge that needed to be imparted to do this job well and to do it successfully. And so we started the Essence of Birth, which was if not the first, one of the very first birth photography courses where we really delved into obviously understanding your camera and figuring out how to create these beautiful birth images. But I think often more importantly, what it means to be a birth worker, what it means to be with people as they give birth, how to support your clients in a way that doesn't feel obtrusive or overbearing. That was really important to us. And so we talk a lot about that in our course. And we've been running that now for years, and we've helped train hundreds of birth photographers from obviously a lot of folks in the United States and Canada, but we've had people take the course in Europe, in
All over the
Asia,
world.
in
Yeah.
Africa, in Australia, all over the world. And so to see that kind of international community grow has been really, really special. And it's wonderful to see people take the course and then shoot their first birth. And I'm like, oh my God, like this took me like 3 or 4 years to get to
Right.
this level, right? It took me, 50 births where I'm stumbling around and not knowing what I'm doing and praying for like afternoon sunlight to get to this level. And so it's really cool to see photographers take the course and then go out and create images that are exceed my own images, images that I'm just blown away by. We love, love, love that. So Jen and I we have one foot in the birth photography space. We are both still practicing. We photograph births every single week. And so we have one foot in that world. And then the other foot is in Birth Becomes You, education, support, community, now this podcast. And I feel like it's really special to be able to do both. I think a lot of times with educators, you see them kind of graduate from doing the work and they kind of become, okay, now I'm going to teach people how to do this. And I maybe will dabble in this, field every once in a while. But for us, at least right now, we've really believed that you learn best from people that are actually in it with you. And so we have stayed in it the last 10 years and we have no plans on leaving. During COVID, during all that craziness, we were on the forefront trying to help get birth photographers in the birth space. We were doing the whole dance and show, trying to get into hospitals, all of that, because we felt like if we're going to help the community, we have to be doing it ourselves as well. And so that's been really, really important to our business. And yeah, I just can't imagine not being in the birth space. I keep on telling myself I'm going to take a sabbatical and then I end up with, 20 more births. So eventually I'll take a little bit of a break, but not right now.
So when we first started doing birth photography, we didn't have a whole lot of resources that were at our fingertips. And I think a big part of starting Birth Becomes You was creating resources for new birth photographers. As Monet talked about, we first started with our toolkit, and we were really overwhelmed by the amount of support and love that we got when we first put out that product. It was really surprising to see midwives buying the toolkit and doulas buying the toolkit and other photographers, and just trying to like step into the birth space with a different mindset of like, I'm not going to just be a doula today. I'm going to be a doula and I'm going to take some photos that are going to be something that you can have forever, and you can look back on your birth and see how strong and powerful and amazing you were. And so it was really cool to see all of these birth workers really embrace taking photos and giving people some visibility during birth. And so after we started with the toolkit and continued to create products, we have our Essence of Birth course. But beyond that, we really just wanted to equip birth photographers with everything that you need from start to finish. So we also have contracts, model releases. We have an editing course, and we have presets to help you edit your birth photos. Presets have been used by hundreds, if not 1,000 birth photographers out there. We always test our presets on dozens and dozens of birth images, my own, Monet's, and then we usually ask for images from within the community so that everything that we're really putting out there is really fine-tuned, tested, and just ready and available for birth workers to use immediately. We also have a Facebook community, and at this time we have over 5,000 members. Almost everyone in the community is a birth photographer or has been a birth photographer and definitely working in the birth space. And that community is really great at not only, fostering friendships and helping people not just step in the birth space, but be in the birth space.
Okay, everyone. So Jen and I wanted to play a little game that we're going to try to do every episode because I think this is really the hardest part of the job, perhaps, is knowing when to go to a birth. So I am going to give Jen a hypothetical, actually, it really happened, a real life situation. And we're going to hear when she would go to the birth, and I will share what I did and if it ended up working out well or not. So I had a client, it was her third baby. She had her other two babies around 40, 41 weeks. And at 36 weeks and a few days, her water broke in the middle of the night. So she went to the hospital, and I did not hear from them until about 8 a.m. She said, I'm having inconsistent contractions, and we are going to start Pitocin, I think, in a few hours. So I said, okay. I said, keep me updated. Let me know when you start Pitocin. Then the next message I got was, we decided to do an epidural before starting Pitocin. Epidural is in, Pitocin is started. Contractions are every 5 minutes or so. I can't tell if they're intense or not because I have an epidural. And I knew that her last check was, I think, at like 9 a.m. that morning, and she was 1.5 centimeters, maybe like 50% effaced. So, when would you go? Knowing
What
that
time is it? What time was
it's
the
like
last
it's
update?
11 o'clock. So she's
So
an
like 2 hours
epidural.
later.
Yeah, epidural is
Okay.
in, Pitocin has started. She was one and a half
Why did she
centimeters.
get the epidural? Did she get it because she was tired or because she was feeling discomfort?
No, they actually did the epidural before they even started Pitocin.
Just
So to
because she,
prevent, she did not want to be in a lot of pain. So they just did it preventatively before they started Pitocin. And she
and
had, I will say her other labors were straightforward slash fast. They weren't precipitous, but they were not long labors. They were relatively fast labors.
I would
Okay,
probably
go.
go when she was 5 to 6 centimeters. And that's always a little tricky because she's not feeling the contractions and she may or may not get checked. So if at 11 o'clock your next update was they were every 5 minutes, I might ask, like, can you tell how intense they are or anything like that? If she could not, I'd probably wait maybe another hour and then I would head to the birth. Just because this is a multip and she's got an epidural, contractions are every 5 minutes. She can't feel what's going on. I'd always rather be there sooner rather than later, because I never want to miss a birth. And so I would probably go and just kind of see where things were at, especially if it was during the day. I may not quite do this at night if somebody was trying to sleep. So I guess that's my short answer.
No, that's great. That's totally was my thought process. I made a very different decision because it was during the day. And so I thought, I'm fine going a little bit early. I'll bring my laptop. I can always edit or take a walk if I need to. So I told the dad, I said, you know what? I think I should just come. And he actually told me, he was like, I don't know, like nothing seems to be happening. And I was like, well, I'm afraid though that once things start happening, it's going to happen very quickly. So I went to the hospital, I got there, and there wasn't actually, it was very slow. There was nothing going wrong. She was sleeping. But then within about, I would say an hour, I took a walk. I came back, they checked her, and she was only 4 centimeters. And I was like, oh, maybe I timed this wrong. Mom
Mhm.
was really discouraged. But as often will happen with a multip who is being induced and has a good contraction pattern, she did have a really good contraction pattern. She went from 4 centimeters to complete and pushing in 45 minutes. So I think they checked her around 3:15 and we had a baby at 4 p.m. So thankfully I was there. I I honestly, like, if I had gotten that check at home, I don't think I would have rushed to the hospital. I think I would have been like, okay, I'll get there maybe in an hour. But because I was there and because I was able to see how quickly her contractions were coming and just kind of, you can even, with an epidural, they're still laboring, they're still
Mhm.
experiencing contractions. And you can see that sometimes better than they can articulate it themselves. And so I could see that things were changing. And sure enough, we had a baby 45 minutes later. So, yeah, that was a tricky one. I feel
Yeah.
like it's always really hard when you have a multip with an epidural because things can change so
So quickly.
rapidly. And then
Mhm.
oftentimes, once you realize that they've changed, that baby is almost coming out, and there's not really a lot of time to get there if you're not already there. So
Yeah.
be aware. If your client has had a few babies and has an epidural, you need to be on top of your game for sure.
And also your client was 36 weeks, so this is a
Yes.
smaller baby than what she has had before.
Right.
And I do find that like sometimes those smaller babies just come out just a little quicker. So it's
Yes.
good to be even, more ready and more prepared.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we are so glad that you tuned in for our first podcast episode. And if you would like to learn more about us and Birth Becomes You, you can go to our website or you can check out our Facebook group if you are a birth photographer or if you are wanting to become a birth photographer. Please just make sure you answer all of our questions. We do not add anybody to the group who hasn't filled out all of the questions. We want to make sure that we're only adding people to the group who are birth workers and birth photographers to create a really safe space for everyone to openly talk about birth stories and share images.
We would love for you to subscribe to our podcast, to follow us, to send us questions or topics you'd like us to cover. We want this to help you. And so if you have specific things that you have questions about, please feel free to send us a message on Instagram. And if you enjoyed this podcast, we would love for you to leave us a 5-star review on Apple. More reviews mean that more people can find this podcast and, more importantly, the Birth Becomes You community. We would love for you to join and be part of this incredible movement of birth imagery around the world.
Thanks for tuning in. Find out more about us, our courses, and other tools for birth photography at birthbecomesyou.com. And make sure to follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Birth Becomes You. See you on the flip side.